I spoke calmly. Linda, that 100-year-old deed is legally binding. According to this order, your master bedroom, your gourmet kitchen, and half your formal living room are sitting on my family's land. As of today, I'm reclaiming it. At that moment, a truck arrived carrying heavy concrete barriers. I instructed the driver to position them across the center of her grand entrance. You can't do this. My daughter's wedding rehearsal is tonight. Guests arrive in 3 hours, she screamed, gripping the gate as locks clicked shut. Well, I replied evenly. Since you were so determined to build on my land without permission, I thought I'd help finish the project. Only now, you're on the wrong side of the wall. I had effectively turned her $10 million mansion into a prison. The only legal access to her garage was now blocked by my property line. Even her Mercedes was trapped. She collapsed to her knees, shouting in disbelief. She had tried to steal a few feet of my yard and lost half her house in return. But it didn't end there. On the wedding day, instead of flowers and music, her mansion was surrounded by orange fencing and no trespassing signs. Guests parked blocks away because the grand driveway she wanted so badly was sealed behind concrete barriers. Inside, the situation worsened. Since I legally owned the land beneath the eastern wing, my lawyer delivered a ground lease agreement. The terms were simple. Demolish the 40% of the house on my property, or pay me $10,000 per month to remain. In desperation, Linda called an emergency HOA meeting, hoping to claim my land through eminent domain. But once the century-old deed was shown, even her allies turned against her. If she had misrepresented her own property lines, what else had she manipulated? By the meeting's end, the board voted to remove her as president. Defeated, she faced reality. She couldn't afford the monthly rent, and she couldn't sell a house built partly on someone else's land. 3 months later, a for sale sign appeared, but not for the house. It was for the materials. A developer bought it at a massive loss, promising to demolish the structure and restore the original property lines. I stood on my porch holding that rusted iron chest as the demolition crew tore out the driveway that started it all. Linda left in a dusty, modest sedan, her $10 million pride shattered. And I finally reclaimed my peace, my garden, and justice. Remember this. Never build your palace on someone else's history. If you enjoyed the story, comment, and share. Subscribe to DH Story for more powerful stories like this. Thanks for watching. Linda believed her $10 million lifestyle gave her ownership over my backyard. But when her construction crew began tearing into the soil for that illegal wraparound driveway, their machine slammed into something solid. Buried beneath the dirt for more than a century was a rusted iron chest. And what was hidden inside didn't just stop her precious road project. It proved her entire mansion was standing on my family's land. Stay with me, because what the police uncovered in that box changed everything. That morning began with a sound no homeowner ever wants to wake up to, the deep, pounding rumble of a diesel engine idling right outside the bedroom window. I rushed to look and saw a towering yellow excavator crushing my prize-winning hydrangeas like they were weeds. And there she was, pointing across my yard as if she ruled the world. Linda, the proud HOA president. For months, she had been eyeing the corner of my property. She wanted a sweeping, grand driveway to match her $10 million mansion. There was only one issue. My backyard stood in her way. I had already rejected her request 3 separate times. But Linda wasn't the kind of woman who accepted no. In her mind, her money and position crowned her the queen of the neighborhood. "Start digging," she shouted at the crew. I barely had time to put on shoes before running outside, waving my arms. "Stop. This is private property." I yelled. She simply smirked, holding a folder filled with what looked like questionable documents. "It's HOA common ground now, Alex. Step aside for progress," she sneered. And then everything shifted. The excavator's bucket struck something with a loud metallic clang. The earth refused to give way. The machine shuddered and stalled. Workers jumped down into the hole, brushing dirt aside until the edge of a heavy, rusted iron chest came into view. Linda's eyes gleamed with greed. "It's on my project site, which means it belongs to the HOA," she declared instantly. But I knew my family's history. This land had belonged to us for generations. Nobody touches that box until the authorities arrive, I said firmly, pulling out my phone to call police and the local historical society. The workers stepped back, sensing trouble. Linda's face burned red with anger as she realized her quick construction project had just turned into a legal nightmare. What she didn't understand yet was that the chest held a century-old court order, one powerful enough to transform her $10 million mansion into a $10 million cage. Within 20 minutes, a sheriff and a historian arrived. Linda paced in the mud her crew had created, her expensive heels sinking deeper with every step. "This is ridiculous," she snapped at the sheriff. "That box is on my construction site. It's HOA property. I want it moved." The sheriff glanced at the chest, then at me. "Alex, do you have your survey papers?" I didn't just have surveys. I had a collection of family records. As the historian carefully cleaned dirt from the lid, the brittle lock gave way with a heavy snap. Inside there was no treasure, no gold. Instead, there were wax-sealed envelopes and a hand-drawn map on thick, yellow parchment. The historian's hands trembled. This is an original land deed from 1920, he whispered. He pointed to a red boundary line that didn't match the current fences. According to that century-old court document, my family's land didn't end at my garden. It stretched nearly 50 feet farther east, cutting straight to the middle of Linda's luxury estate. Linda's face drained of color. "That's impossible. My home was built by the top developers in the state." The historian shook his head. "It appears the developers in the 1980s altered the boundary lines to fit this mansion. They never legally cleared it with the original estate holders, Alex's great-grandfather." I stared at the map, then at the towering stone pillars of her mansion. Not only was her driveway on my land, but almost 40% of her house stood on property she didn't legally own. The sheriff turned to the crew. "Pack up. This is no longer a construction site. It's a legal dispute." Linda stood frozen as I held the ancient deed. I wasn't just blocking her driveway anymore. I was about to block her entire life. The self-proclaimed queen of the HOA was discovering her palace had been built on a lie. The next morning, the neighborhood was eerily quiet. No bulldozers, no shouting, just Linda standing on her balcony, glaring down at me with pure hatred. But I had been busy. My lawyer had worked all night, verifying the 1920 deed from the chest. By 10 o'clock, I was walking up her lavish, illegal driveway carrying a thick stack of documents and a court order. She stormed down the steps. "If you're here to apologize, it's too late. I'm suing you for delaying my construction." I said nothing. I handed her the top page, an emergency injunction, and notice to vacate the eastern 40% of her property. "What is this?" she stammered, her hand shaking.